One of the chief gods of the Indian religion, the mythology and folklore of Shiva, grant us insight into our psychology, human nature, and our place in the universe. Not only can he be appreciated as a deity, but his art, tales, and forms help us understand the human experience. In the works of Carl Jung and his successors, the idea of the mature masculine was posited, suggesting a balanced temperament which reconciles the different dimensions of life, those of the warrior, king, magician, and lover. It's difficult to achieve this level of wisdom and self-mastery. Often we come short or go too far in one domain or another. The archetypes recall the writings of Aristotle, who suggested virtue involved achieving a golden mean between the extremes of too much and too little of a trait. While civilization tends to value the external beauty of the feminine, Shaivism, the Indian sect of Shiva, values what it considers rare, elusive, and ambitious, the soul of the mature man. Outwardly intangible, it's a product of hardship, industry, and wisdom. Shiva is one of the chief gods of the Indian religion, worshipped alongside the other major deities, Vishnu and Kali. His name deriving from Sanskrit, Shiva means auspicious or benevolent, revealing his true nature despite being the god of destruction. Shiva is a part of the Trimurti, the trinity of Indian religion. He shares this pantheon with Brahma the creator and Vishnu the maintainer. In Indian religion, the highest principle is Brahman, the impersonal, universal divine. The highest gods, or those who reach enlightenment or nirvana, become co-participants in Brahman, losing their sense of individuality and joining in a state of union with the whole. This system allows a personal deity to become an expression of the supreme God, allowing the worshipper to interpret their unique traits as expressions of the divine. Though India is often characterized as a polytheistic civilization, most of its adherents revere a favored deity who becomes their vehicle to monotheism. Shiva has historical antecedents in the more ancient gods, Rudra and Indra. These Bronze Age deities were originally introduced into the subcontinent by the Aryan invasions. Rudra was associated with anger or wrath, while Indra was associated with the sky or thunder. We find these aspects expressed in the wrathful dimension of Shiva, in his portrayal in Tibetan Buddhism, or as the god of destruction. In India, the gods often come in different forms. This not only articulates the different sides of human nature, but allows the subcontinent's many sects to reconcile, interpreting its different gods as alternative expressions of existing ones. This system made it natural for different divinities to syncretize, old gods and myths merging, evolving, and transforming into their modern variants. While secular historians might look at this process and argue it shows a human origin to the gods, another involves the idea of intuitive mysticism, that through revelation, over the centuries, mystics and mythologists had insights granted to them about the devas. Shiva has many titles and epithets that show the different sides of his nature. One of these is Bolanath, the archetype of the simple man. Self-effacing, he has few possessions, is content with little, and is easy to satisfy. He trusts in the cosmos to provide for him. Bolanath is a patron of fools, recalling the holy fools of Christianity and Islam. His philosophy promotes a surrender to the divine, viewing humility and the admittance of one's ignorance as constituting the path to wisdom. Shiva is sometimes called the poison drinker. This comes from a myth where the gods and demons greedily churn the waters of the ocean in order to extract more amrita, the elixir of immortality. Their plan backfiring, the waters began to emit toxic fumes that threatened to suffocate everyone. Going to Shiva for help, he chose to drink the poisonous waters himself. Seeing the danger, his spouse Parvati intervened at the last minute to catch the poison in his throat. This discolored it and granted him the epithet. Not only does this represent the throat chakra, the title has a greater meaning, referring to the voluntary death of tapas, or ascetic practice. Shiva is often portrayed as consorting with demons or evil spirits, these beings turning into his ganas, or attendants. This recalls the narrative of Christ in the Bible, when he's condemned by the Pharisees for consorting with sinners, prostitutes, and tax collectors, suggesting that the holy are not polluted by those they associate with. In this capacity, Shiva is shown as possessing an all-inclusive morality, lacking prejudices, and functioning as a redeemer of the wretched. An imbiber of intoxicants, Shiva is associated with ganja, a ritual cannabis, in this way recalling a comparison to Dionysus in Greek mythology. Like the sacred substances of other cultures, Shiva's intoxicants are used as tools to liberate the finite self from stress and turmoil, granting it glimpses of liberty, dispassion, and reverie. His practices recall the natives of the American Southwest, who take entheogens, or divine drugs, to induce otherworldly experiences. Despite this, the main practice of Shaivism is meditation, the belief of the yogis that through right concentration, one can access natural states of ecstasy or samadhi. Shiva is associated with divine madness, the idea that in radical states of self-loss, we can catch glimpses of the true nature of the cosmos. In some myths, Shiva loses himself in madness or ecstasy, similar to figures like Odin. At other times, he consciously acts eccentrically or strangely, doing so to test the wisdom of his spouse, Parvati. Said to be white as camphor, Shiva is associated with the cremation ground. Smeared in ashes, he recalls the biblical phrase of ashes to ashes, this symbolism emphasizing the transitory nature of the material world and the ideal of renunciation. In one myth of Shiva, while he's withdrawn in meditation, Kama, the god of passion and temptation, comes to shoot him with arrows to ignite thoughts of agitation and lust in his mind. Though similar in this capacity to Cupid, in Indian mythology, Kama has a more malign and sinister nature. Provoked, Shiva opens his third eye and burns Kama to ashes, showing the god's self-mastery and restraint. Shiva's followers, called the Aghoris, often smear themselves with ashes to make themselves appear white and imitate his appearance. Using skulls as cups or drinking goblets, these frightening practices show the idea of mortification. Finally, Shiva is a patron of mystics and esotericists, in some tales descending to earth in disguise to disseminate hidden or occult knowledge. He's also a patron of the arts, inspiring creative writings, paintings, and dances that express transcendental themes. Shiva's consort or spouse is Kali. Like Shiva, she comes in multiple forms, also appearing as Parvati and Shakti. Kali is her terrifying form, associated with wrath, destruction, and the negative or black aspects of the feminine. She's often portrayed as a devouring and indomitable conqueror, wielding blades or holding cups of poison. Though this symbolism appears frightening, it's meant to express the transcendence of self achieved by the spiritual aspirant. Shiva's terrifying forms, which match with Kali, are Bhairava and Kala, the masculine versions of time or annihilation. That said, these forms are usually rarer, with Shiva more often portrayed in his benevolent fair form, in contrast with Kali's black one. Kali's calm form is Parvati, a representation of her as a domestic spouse, pacific, supportive, and loving. In this form, she forms a family with Shiva and becomes the example of a virtuous householder. A more esoteric version of Kali is Shakti. The word itself means power. In this form, she's often coupled with Shiva, who represents consciousness, the couple embodying the two fundamental principles of nature. Shakti also refers, at times, to hidden power or energy in the body. Through meditation, a yogi can activate this power, causing it to surge through the spine and leading to mystical experiences. One argument is that Shaivism, the religion of Shiva and Kali, is a self-arising religion, emerging from the fundamental principles of nature, not only male and female, but white and black, sun and moon, and 1 and 0, reflecting the world's division into binary terms. In one Hindu myth, Shiva appears as an infinite white pillar, this phallic symbol extending indefinitely through a vast black void. Despite this, Shiva is also associated with the Trishula, or trident, representing not 2, but 3 principles. If we observe the masculine and feminine, the positive and negative, the attracting and repelling, Shaivism posits the existence of a third principle, one transcendental and reconciling, combining and elevating the 2 principles to a state above nature. One of the most beautiful forms of Shiva is that of Ardhanarishvara, the syncretic, androgynous form of the god, in union with his consort Kali. This figure represents the male and female, the white and black, combined in a state of harmony. Shiva occupies the right, the active and dominant side, while Kali occupies the left. In Jungian thought, Ardhanarishvara represents the reconciliation of the animus and anima. In Greek philosophy, Aristophanes imagined the idea of the circle people, hermaphrodites who combined the traits of both gender and were sexually self-contented. He argued the source of our suffering came from when the gods cut us in half, forcing us to spend our lives seeking our other half in search of completion. While Shiva and Kali represent self-denial, celibacy, and sexual continence on the one hand, they also represent sensual pleasure, sexual exploration, and enjoyment of the other. In one myth, Shiva proposes to Kali while she's engaged in penance. At this time, she rejects him, suggesting that spiritual work that is ceased before it is complete is useless. Later, however, they're united in marital love and devotion. Tantra, or sacred sex, is a term used to describe their union, the perception that they represent the archetypes of male and female, the divine masculine and feminine. Combined, Shiva and Kali show that both continence and sensuality can be integrated in a healthy expression of the psyche, one that's both sex-positive and sacred. Indian art is rich in symbolism, portraying the gods with weapons, animals, and adornments that are used to express different aspects of their nature. If we take time to examine and unpack them, we find Shiva and Kali possess some of the most powerful symbols in Hinduism. Shiva's matted hair represents his self-simplification and renunciation. His closed eyes represent his equanimity relative to the passions in the material world. The crescent moon on his head represents the cycle of time, just as it cycles in the sky. It's also said to hide a hidden crack by which the imbiber can drink the secret drink of Amrita. Called ambrosia in Greek mythology, this is the celestial nectar of the gods. Shiva's damaru, or drum, represents destruction. When Shiva beats it during his divine dance, it brings about the end of this world cycle, or yuga, and the shattering of the universe. The tiger pelt Shiva sits on represents his self-control, his mastery over the fearsome aspects of the world and our nature. The snake Vasuki references Shiva's tale of the poison drinker, while also symbolizing Shakti or Kundalini, a hidden spiritual power in man. Usually portrayed as coiled at the base of the spine, the most adept yogis were able to activate this power in states of deep meditation. Shiva is often shown beside a white bull, Nandi, who represents purity, masculinity, and virility. Shiva often gestures in the Abhaya Mudra, the gesture of fearlessness, communicating the idea of deathlessness to his disciples. Provoking controversy when the Muslims first invaded India, Shiva is usually represented through aniconic phallic symbolism. While appearing profane, this actually represents revering the masculine principle and its potential in a divine ideal. Similarly, Kali is represented in yonic symbolism, and occasionally the two are shown in union, symbolizing completion or perfection. The two are also portrayed by the yantras, the male symbol facing up and the female down, with the two combined, representing completion or union. While usually more associated with his spouse Kali, Shiva is sometimes portrayed with multiple arms. In Indian religion, these symbolize the gods' agency and power, and the multifaceted aspects of their nature. Shiva's consort Kali is associated with warlike and deathly symbols. She's often portrayed holding a cup of poison, representing man's fate and the voluntary death of renunciation. She holds a scimitar which removes the head, expressing how the mystic transcends a sense of individuality or self when they merge into union with the divine. Kali's symbols recall Christianity, the paradoxes of poverty expressed by Christ. In the Gospels, Christ advises the subordination of one's will to another, a scorn of wealth and celebrity, and the practice of celibacy, actions of self-loss that are supposed to lead to spiritual rewards. Kali wears a garland of skulls, recalling the cross or the divine messengers of Buddhism. It shows that all our thoughts, dreams, and ambitions end in vanity, our minds reduced to nothing but being empty skulls in the end. Kali is often shown with her tongue protruding, and a reverent gesture, showing how her ascetic practices are socially unconventional, disregarding what the normative culture thinks. One of the most powerful forms of Shiva is Nataraja, the Lord of the Dance. As Nataraja, Shiva's third eye is open, granting him vision and the power of annihilation. The god raises his leg and arms as he does the dance of destruction, destroying the fallen universe before it can be remade. Shiva is shown with an aura of fire that circles around him, showing his otherworldly power. Beneath him, the demoniacal dwarf Apasmara, who symbolizes ignorance, is treaded on. He represents the eye-making principle, ahamkara, the illusion that causes us to wrongly identify as the individual self. If we ponder what the most profound symbols produced by humanity are, we might identify Shiva Nataraja and the cross. Associated with Western civilization, while simple in appearance, the cross is a complex symbol. It represents the suffering of the human condition, the Christian equivalent of the Buddha's sickness, old age, and death. A symbol of torture, it portrays the theme of injustice, of bad things happening to good people, as Job laments in the Bible. At the same time, it symbolizes the redemptive power of suffering, that through hardship and patient endurance, we can become nobler and greater, the spirit becoming more refined, readier to leave this physical world behind for a higher plane. The Lord of the Dance portrays Shiva as the supreme god, wielding total power over the cosmos. His dance reflects the principles of beauty, sublimity, and bliss. Despite the harsh nature of the physical world, he expresses the idea that suffering and loss are part of a greater harmony. We can imagine Shiva dancing as the Second World War unfolds, as the German army invades Russia in Barbarossa, and when Hitler hides in his bunker and shoots himself at the end of the war. We can see Shiva dancing when China divides into its three kingdoms, dissolved into an era of bloodshed and romanticism. We can see Shiva dancing as Alexander embarks on his campaign to India, as a mother gives birth to her child, and as a lunatic babbles in an asylum. We can see him dancing as the monks of Tibet tread through the snow to their monastery, as a teenager dies suddenly from fentanyl poisoning, and as protesters rise up against the upper class. This integration of the benign and horrible, the two sides of the human experience, is a key feature of Shiva's cosmology. As a god of destruction, he embraces all without moral judgment. Albert Einstein, a physicist, grappled with the ultimate principles that govern the physical universe throughout his life. In his early years, he hypothesized the universe was vast, fixed, and static, with a cosmic force balancing the effect of gravity over time. Later, with Edwin Hubble's data that galaxies were moving away from us, that the universe was expanding, Einstein shifted his model to one of a cyclical universe. He imagined a cosmos which starts as a singularity, then explodes out in an eruption of matter and energy. Then, on reaching a certain extremity or size, an unknown principle acts as a cosmic balancer, reversing the process of expansion into one of contraction. The universe retracts in a crunch, only for the cycle to recur again and again. Einstein later decided against this theory, stating that while there was a point of origin, the universe was expanding, with no indication a contraction would occur. In line with this, Western culture views time as linear. In the Bible, the universe begins with creation. God separates the light from the darkness, gives form to the void, and shapes the earth, its waters, and man. In the biblical narrative, man disobeys, falls from grace, and brings suffering, ignorance, and death into the human condition. History then unfolds in the tales of the patriarchs until the life of Christ, his death and resurrection promising redemption and the conquest of death. The world then continues until it concludes with the time of judgment, when heaven and earth come together. Analogously, this linear view of time recurs in Western science. Modern secular civilization accepts a fixed point of origin that moves forward in a state of continual development. Animals adapt to their environment by evolution. Meanwhile, human culture advances through knowledge, technical development, and economic expansion. In contrast to these views, Indian culture affirms the idea of a cyclical universe. Believers in reincarnation and eternal recurrence, the subcontinent sees us as returning life after life, using different forms to play out the karma, or consequences of our past deeds. In Hinduism, the world passes through the yugas, or world ages, periods of creation, evolution, and devolution, until the world is destroyed. We're currently said to be in the Kali Yuga, simply meaning black and not referring to the goddess, the spiritual dark age. The Indian view might interpret God as a state of singularity at the birth of the universe, everything consolidated as one. It recalls figures like Plotinus and Plato, who presented a vision of the universe where we emanate out, then return again. In a previous video, we discussed the Jesus prayer of the Hesychasts, exploring its similarity to Eastern mantras, and how it could be used to discipline the mind. One of the great mantras of India, obeisance to Shiva, can be employed in the same way, to achieve mental stillness, as well as to seek the intercession of Shiva. In terms of the latter view, Indians believe that the more one repeats the mantra, the more merit is gained, until the prayer brings a result. Tales of this exist in Indian culture, with dedicated acolytes repeating the mantra over and over again until the deva appears and grants his boon. In one myth, a demon called Rakta Bija actually follows the practice, and the pleased Shiva, in his impartiality, grants the asura a blessing. He then wishes for the ability to reproduce himself by spilling drops of his blood on the ground. He then uses this power to conquer, oppress, and tyrannize his rivals, quickly overcoming even the gods. Shiva himself is unable to stop the demon, so the gods turn to Kali to salvage the situation. Taking on her destructive form of Durga, the impassible, Kali grows many arms, and in them wields her powerful swords or scimitars. Descending into a frenzy, she slays hordes of the demon and gorges herself on his blood. The furor of this becomes so overwhelming, she loses herself in her dance of destruction and soon threatens to destroy the world. With no one able to stop her, the gods turn to Shiva, who lies on the ground before his spouse. Only when Kali treads on her husband does she stir from her ferocity and return to her normal self as Parvati. Like in the tale of Shakti, Kali allegorically represents power, our capacity for agency and action, while Shiva represents consciousness, the substratum that allows everything to occur. Another mantra of Shiva invokes him as the three-eyed one, the deliverer of salvation, recalling the teaching of deathlessness in Buddhism. In the mantra, the devotee seeks Shiva's aid in helping to detach from the limited, finite sense of self in pursuit of moksha or enlightenment. In terms of locations for pilgrims, the sacred city of Shiva is Varanasi in North India. Here, supplicants come to pay obeisance to him in its temples and seek ritual purification by bathing in the Ganges sacred waters. Another sacred site of Shiva is Mount Kailash in Tibet. The abode of Shiva on the earthly plane, he's said to reside here with his spouse Parvati. Like we've seen elsewhere, the mountain itself constitutes a phallic symbol, with the lake at its base being a yonic one. The source of the Indus River lies within the region of Kailash, distinguishing it as an origin for the life-giving waters of India. Kailash is believed to be a worldly passage to heaven. Pilgrims come to the site for spiritual renewal, viewing it as similar to the sacred mountains of other cultures, like Ararat, Athos, and Arunachala. There is something indomitable and awe-inspiring when we stand beneath a great peak, emphasizing the grandeur of nature, the mountain protruding into the sky, and posing man with the challenge of summiting it. That said, no one has ever climbed to the peak of Kailash. During the time of the Raj, English climber Hugh Rutledge, who led 2 expeditions up Everest, arrived in the area and surveyed Kailash, but by the standards of the time, considered it unclimbable. Later, Austrian climber Herbert Tichy and Italian Reinhold Messner made inquiries but decided against climbing the mountain. Locals who viewed it as sacred convinced them that trying to climb it would be a profane action. Since Messner, climbing Kailash has been legally banned, the government acknowledging its religious significance for Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains. On top of Kailash, Shiva and Parvati are said to live as householders with their family. In Indian culture, they have 2 sons, Ganesha, the elephant-headed god of wisdom, and Kartikeya, the god of war. While these gods have their own mythologies, we can use them to construe the nature of Shiva. His sons represent the 2 forces that constitute manhood, wisdom and conflict, the first being necessary to navigate the world and its hardships, and the second being able to perform and conduct oneself heroically. Jungian psychology presents the idea of the mature masculine, a balanced personality, rare in the world. It combines the roles of the warrior, king, magician, and lover. Neither weak nor tyrannical, the mature man reconciles the contradictions and paradoxes of human nature. In Shiva, we see the roles of an ascetic, artist, and poet. We see continence and self-denial, as well as sexual fulfillment and experience. Shiva balances the spiritual and material. A wise intercessor, as the destroyer, he transcends traditional moral categories and facilitates the transformation of the universe through historic cycles. Finally, through his union with Kali, Shiva reconciles the masculine and feminine, the white and the black, the animus and anima. As Ardhanarishvara, Shiva embodies the completion of the individual and the perfection of the masculine ideal.